Sit with Lexi B.
Hey fam, welcome back to the Sit with Lexi B podcast. My name is Lexi B, and this episode that you are about to watch, we have the Camille Stewart. For folks who don't know, Camille is a powerhouse in the tech industry, specifically when it comes to policy and privacy. Not only has she worked in the tech space, she also has worked in Washington, having real conversations about privacy, what does it look like, and how to advocate for people online. In this conversation with Camille, we are talking about what does it look like to occupy spaces that were not meant for you. I'm gonna take a pause, because that statement resonates with so many people, especially when it comes to capitalism. We don't think about that we are literally occupying territories and spaces that were not meant for us to be there in the first place. And regardless of how good your diversity and inclusion programs are, the point is that if the space was not built for me, there is always going to be an issue or something that I'm going to have to navigate. Camille and I discuss this in great depth and talk about her experience and being the only person in the room, or even her experience in bringing people together, making sure that there are more faces in conversations, more accents, more head wraps, more everything in the room to make sure that you are building products, you are building policies, and you are speaking truth to power based on your consumers that are using it.
Sit with Lexi B podcast.
Camille, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Before we get started, I do want to honor you. I have watched you for some years now, and what you have done with your career in privacy is phenomenal. As a person who dabbles in privacy at work, dabbles.
Hey.
And also just watching you build a community around privacy practitioners has been phenomenal. And you know, I'm all about the community, sis. I'm all about bringing people together and trying to figure out our Underground Railroad and getting our Canada and getting our freedom. And so I do want to honor you and thank you for that. You're doing some great work.
I really appreciate that, because I have been watching you create safe spaces and give voice to the voiceless for so many years, since at least 2019. And when I transitioned into big tech, you had created a space that I walked into and found women and practitioners who were willing to help me get settled in that community, help me navigate big tech. So I want to honor you as well. I feel like you are championing, a safe space for so many.
I'm trying, girl. Everybody deserves their freedom, okay? As I say, everybody deserves their Canada. And I also think that if everybody had their Canada, people would be a little less oppressive to other people. That's a separate
Yes, for sure. But that's, another conversation.
So to get started, what is in your coffee cup? What are you drinking with us today?
I wish it was a little tequila, but right now it's a little water because I'm still breastfeeding my 7-month-old.
Where are your people from? Where are you from?
I am Jamaican American. My parents, my older sister, all born in Jamaica. I was the first of my siblings born here. I am proud to be of Jamaican heritage, very connected to my roots, but also proud to be an American in the beautiful diaspora that melts itself here.
So does that mean that we have some like brown stewed chicken on the kitchen table and some oxtail and some festival? Yes.
Yes, some curry chicken and some curry goat. Yeah, we're ready.
I'm not mad. For the record, I think Jamaican food is one of the best diaspora foods out there.
Yes.
If we have to rank,
I'm biased, but agree.
But I'm down for a good curry. Like I will roll through. Tell Mama Camille that I will
come through. Please come
curry. Don't play me. Because I will eat it. And I'm not Jamaican.
The door is always open for you.
I appreciate
always
that.
Open for you. Come through.
I appreciate that. I love that. Today I want to talk to you about how to occupy space and thrive in spaces that were not created for you. And I would argue were created to keep you out because of your career and what you have done. I think that you've done that very well. in the face of you having to do it, maybe not wanting to do it, but having to do it in order to build a career. So when was the first time that you realized in corporate America that this was not built for you in any capacity?
Yeah. I mean, every time I walk into a room, I am the only. I am usually the only woman. That has changed over the years, which is a welcome evolution. But I am most certainly the only Black woman, particularly in a position of leadership. And so whether it's in corporate America or in government, quite frankly, I have always found myself in rooms where people didn't expect me to be a part of the conversation. They expected me to either be a backbencher or somebody's assistant.
So I know you have a story, because we all have the story, Camille, of when there is a person that mislabels you as the assistant. Because I had a situation when I was 22 at my first tech company where someone mislabeled me as the janitor, even though I was wearing 3-inch heels.
Get out of here.
And told me directly, like, those are some really interesting heels to clean the toilets. So I will never forget that. I will never forget that. So what is one of your stories where you were mislabeled?
During the Obama administration, I walked into a video call with the Situation Room. And so I was at the Department of Homeland Security. We had our own plug-in into this conversation in the Situation Room.
Can you tell us what the Situation Room is for listeners who don't know?
Yes, the Situation Room is a classified conference room at the White House.
Cool.
And the president uses it. And when he's not using it, then a bevy of his advisors use it to convene conversations around national security, economic security topics, whatever is the issue of the day.
Got it.
And at the time, we were convening on writing a policy directive around significant cyber incidents.
Okay.
And I walk into the room and sit at the table, and a few gentlemen also walk in because Department of Homeland Security is huge. And so a number of different components were going to be represented in this conversation. And they were like, who's the person that's leading this? And I was like, that would be me. That's why I'm sitting in the middle of the room.
Welcome to my meeting, gentlemen.
Welcome to my meeting. I am the person drafting this policy on our behalf.
Yes, yes.
And mind you, when they walked into the room, I got the like, why are you sitting in the middle of the room looks, the, shouldn't you be on the back bench? And one of them even tried to like brush his way in and do the excuse me without saying like you should move. Because I think at that point they had been trained enough. Don't say move. Make people feel uncomfortable enough to feel like they need to move. So it came to that moment and they all kind of backed up and looked and were very confused until I started the meeting and handled leading the conversation with the Situation Room and then our counterparts across the interagency. But that was one of those big moments where it just felt good also because I was like, y'all walked in here and thought you were going to muscle me out of the conversation because you thought I was somebody's note taker, intern. I'm not quite sure. Only to have to default to me to convene the meeting and to lead the discussion.
I think it's a very layered experience to have to continually reintroduce yourself to people. And I think that depending on what you look like and who your mama looks like and where you come from, that reintroduction gets tiring.
Oh, so exhausting.
It's not only I'm the person that's running this meeting in the Situation Room, but it's also like, and here are my 18 qualifications in which why I can do that. And I know for me, I do not walk into rooms and require someone to give me their resume and 2.5 references for us to continue the conversation. So tell me about those feelings of, or exhaustion or whatever feelings you have around that when you have to continually reintroduce yourself.
I am blissfully getting to a place where I do that less and less. I would prefer for you to underestimate me and get blindsided. And that is what's happening more. Or I let other people do it for me. I have ceded the weight of that work to other people. So I had a circumstance, or many a circumstance, particularly while I was at the White House, where someone walked into the room and, as the number 2 at a White House office, there are, of course, people who visually look older than me or actually are older than me. obviously white males, people of all backgrounds. I had a pretty diverse team. And so there was an older white gentleman who was on my team. And we met with a company and everyone walked in and greeted me. They were polite, but they went to him as if he was the one leading the organization. And to his credit, he was very much like, that's the boss. Like, get it together. That's the boss. I'd like to introduce you to my boss, Camille. And then right. And then even one of the more junior people on their team was like, oh my gosh, it's so good to meet you. I have been looking forward to this meeting. Da, da, da. And the person who was the lead of the delegation from the company was bewildered. He was like, I don't understand what's happening. This man calling her the boss, he seems to know who she is from other things. And it was a wonderful introduction for me because this is why allies are so important. They took the weight of that from me. I didn't have to say anything. And I do know that that is a privilege to be able to walk into rooms and know that the conversation will boil down to a point where everyone is going to recognize that I am the person that's leading this conversation. Or even if you don't get a list of my credentials, there's a reason that I was the Deputy National Cyber Director, right? And so I know that that's a privilege. And so I have offloaded some of that exhaustion, but I watch as it happens for other people and try to bridge the gap, because that is a heavy burden to always feel like you have to lay your credentials down on the table. And none of us should have to do that, right? Especially because many of the spaces that we're in, there was already some kind of gatekeeping for you to enter into the room. So no matter what, I should be here.
Right. I don't do it anymore, but I think earlier in my career when I did not know how to navigate it, it was first bewilderment. And then I had this time in my mid to late 20s where it said, you know what? I don't want to have surprises. So, because there is a thug side to me. So I don't want to have to bring them out. Right.
Yes. Fair enough.
Because the mentors are like, don't do that at work. And I'm like, but they started it. So I would overcompensate and come to the meeting and just give my credentials. So I would like, let me introduce myself. Let's get this out of the way. Yes. I know you've never seen cornrows before, but they are professional. And now can we talk about the subject at hand? And I think now, as I've gotten older, I've learned to not care about people's ignorances.
Yes. You know, I had a similar moment. When I was at the Department of Homeland Security, I not over-embraced. I think it was me attempting to be true to myself, but I was like, all of the things that are going to make you uncomfortable about me, I'm going to do them, and do them in spades, and do them unapologetically. Like, I'm going to show up with the red pants and the bright suit. I mean, you still see that with me at the White House. I've got a bright pink suit. I've got a yellow suit, you know, all of these things that I was just kind of like, if you're going to notice me when I walk in, notice me, right? I'm going to be comfortable. I'm going to have my curls popping or my braids or whatever I decide to do to my hair. I'm going to wear an outfit that commands attention in a way that is not traditional, particularly in government spaces. I was not going to wear just a basic black suit or, you know, make myself small. And that was one of the things I saw a lot of Black and brown practitioners, especially in government, do, was make themselves small in their attire and then over introduce themselves to validate their being in the room. And, you know, your way for coping, there's no right or wrong way to cope, but it does evolve as you evolve through your career. And it's nice to look back and realize from whence you came. And so it's nice to hear how you've evolved and to kind of see how I've evolved over time as well.
Which is very interesting because I think it's a catch-22. You try to, if you are the only person in the room and then you try to make yourself small, it doesn't work because you're the only person in the room. So by default, you're already a highlighter in the room, right?
Yes. Yes.
So tell me about how community has really helped you to find this confidence and this joy and this unapologetic attitude about being the only person in the room.
So if I'm recognizing that the spaces I was walking through, tech, critical infrastructure, government, might not, likely did not, definitely did not, have spaces that were made for me and people that look like me. So you often did not feel safe, if ever felt safe. Creating community and finding community was essential. And so I created community through a number of organizations that I founded. I have created platforms for other people to give voice to members of underrepresented communities and kind of highlight the talent that is throughout the national security apparatus or through cybersecurity or tech, because there's so many talented people of color, women, LGBTQ plus professionals that are in these in these spaces, but often feel voiceless, often are hidden, and they're so networked that it makes it even harder that even if you're achieving in those spaces to get some prominence. And so I have found ways to create spaces that feel safe and that also help do some of the legwork for creating visibility in these spaces. But also I make sure to maintain spaces outside of my professional spaces that can fill me up and propel me forward as well.
And what does that look like? Because I also agree with you. I think that we do have to also separate ourselves from this work. Yes. It is important to know that we are not meant to labor, especially Black and brown bodies, because we did that. And so what does it look like to find that community outside of the professional world with people that can pour into you and check you and remind you of who you are?
So I've got two types of that. So I've created spaces like Share the Mic in Cyber that pull together Black practitioners from tech and cyber spaces and create community, give them platform, but also separate them from the day-to-day work and labor and create social spaces and opportunities to just be, right? To commiserate, to vent, to talk about something completely different, to ideate and create and just, step into the fullness of your personhood. But then also I have spaces, brunch club and, convenings that are just like centered on other things, like going out with friends, going out with family. And I think those are so important, both to recognize that there are good people in your industry. So you've got that like social community space that does still tie back to your industry that allows you to see the good in it and the good in people, but then also things that completely remove you and allow you to recover and breathe and feed other parts of your soul and your life.
What is Brunch Club?
Oh, girl. So, in DC.
Come on, Camille, put us on. Because I love a good brunch and I'm not part of a brunch club. So what do I need to do this?
So you can create one. So that's what I did. I decided, because DC is all about the brunch and has been for quite some time. Yes. And there's so many good restaurants that I was like, how do I maximize the brunching without having to do all of the labor? So I created a listserv of folks who wanted to have brunch at least once a month. And then you rotate who is planning the brunch. And so you get brunch every month, the option of brunch every month, a very social brunch, a boozy brunch, however you want to curate it. Someone has to find the restaurant, make the reservations, and make sure everybody knows where to be, when to be there. And people love it because they've only got to plan one a year, maybe. And they show up for a well-executed brunch. And it's just great.
I do love a good brunch. I love a good brunch. I love a good mimosa. I love a good overpriced egg. And shout out to the brunch places. Yes. I do.
Yes, a great cocktail. Start your day. Yes, I love it.
I'm here for it. Tell us how, if there was a difference in being the only person at a tech company versus the only person in the room in government, was there a difference?
Oh, yes. Government doesn't have the pretense of progressiveness.
Okay.
In government, especially particularly in certain spaces, people are what they are. And some of these spaces are very hierarchical. They're very outdated. And there's less of this push to be inclusive and to talk a good talk. Don't get me wrong, that work is going on in government. People are trying to promote diversity, trying to make sure that there are diverse voices represented throughout organizations. But what I've seen is there's less of it's less part of the faux culture in
During
government.
the Obama administration, so I don't work in government, but I feel like during the Obama administration, y'all could have, pretended.
So in the Obama administration, that was a unicorn. That was a unicorn administration. The White House itself felt very different from agencies because most agencies, the predominance of the staff are careers. They are people who stay there all the time. And so I had situations in agencies where, people would physically stand in front of me to block me out of conversations because they did not feel like I should be a part of it, right? And that was in the Obama administration. But you go to the White House and they're throwing BET concerts on the lawn. It's a whole different thing. So there's like pockets, and each agency is a little bit different, depends on how it's composed, depends on how many politicals there are versus how many careers. But overarchingly, what I would say about government is tech has this ethos of being an open, inclusive place where you can be yourself and be creative. And some of that is true, and it breeds really creative and innovative spaces. But based on an archetype from the beginning of kind of the tech space that we know, right? And we have been trying to evolve that, and people's definition of who and ideas of who works in tech is evolving, but the spaces that they created weren't exactly welcoming for people of color and minorities, right? And so, but there's this narrative of it being a very liberal, progressive space. And even if not liberal in a political sense, but I mean progressive as in like we're opening and we're open and we're welcoming and we want people to be in this space. And then you walk into the space and they only want to do that when it's convenient or when it's beneficial. And so it's not an authentic expression of progressiveness. It is a convenient expression of progressive. That's the difference between government and tech, is that, in government, you're going to get it how it is, right? If you're in an agency where they truly value diverse voices and the work has been done, or the administration creates a culture where that is, top of mind, or the way the culture has evolved, great. But if you're in a part of the government that is old and has really leveraged hierarchy to get things done and doesn't really care about diversity or making sure that all of America's voices are represented in a room where you are making policy to benefit and protect all Americans, then you're going to feel that. And you're going to know that because they're not going to pretend that they're not going to talk about it. It's not something they are going to give lip service to if they're not actually doing it in a way that in tech, they'll be like, this is a place for everybody, but then everybody doesn't feel welcome.
I'm going to say something controversial and hear me out. I've been in tech my whole career, as you know, so I've never worked in government. I've never worked in any other industry. And as a little Black girl from St. Louis, Missouri, so coming from this culture that's very direct, right? So like I remember in elementary school, some kid told me on the playground that his father was a dragon master in the KKK. And I was like, that's a data point.
That is a data point.
That's a lot, right?
Noted.
Noted. So then I transitioned and I go to college out in the Bay Area and then end up in tech accidentally. Yeah. And I remember in college calling my parents and they're saying, how is it going? And I said, I've never met so many racist people in my life. And they said, you're from St. Louis, Missouri. You've met racist people. And I'm like, true. But where we're from, the racists are honest about their racism. Right? So like you said, in some of these government agencies, I'm not saying that I agree with how people treated me, but what I saw was what I got. And it wasn't until I came to the Bay Area and, not trying to date myself, but this is like, the first president that I voted for was Obama. So I was in college when he, became president. I will never forget that night. And so, watching him campaign as a college student, living in the San Francisco Bay Area, watching the Yes You Can and Here for Change posters everywhere, right? So all of these people that are not Black, that are clearly voting for this very charismatic, phenomenal man. and his wife. I do have currently a running theory that Michelle was actually the president. That's a separate conversation. But then how they treat me as a non-white body is quite racist. And it's like, I'm not racist. I voted for Obama, but let me show you all the ways that I'm racist. And so now that I'm older, I always awkwardly tell people, if you're just going to not like me for what I look like or where I come from, who I love, or, what my gender expression is, then I'd rather you just say it with your chest.
Thank you.
Some of this California progression is just masked incestuous racism, and that gets people confused.
It really does.
Right?
And you know what? To your point, I would prefer you to call a spade a spade. Then I can also recognize when it's just ignorance and like a systemic thing rather than a direct, you are racist, right? You got questions. You're not sure. You don't know. You haven't had the exposure. Okay, fine. In the Bay Area, and this is the ethos in general, people like to bury the lead. That was a hard adjustment for me. I would prefer for you to be bold and direct in all things. So my problem with the progressive nature was, people presented themselves the same, whether they truly were about that issue, right? That they wanted the space to be inclusive and they wanted to be welcoming or not. And so by the time you figured out who was who, it was in a way that was even shadier than if you had just walked up and been like, I don't want you to be here.
Like, you've literally lost your job. You sitting in HR and you're like, wait a minute.
Right. So Bill told me welcome on day one, said, now I gotta go. Like, what? Yes. Yeah. I have a problem with that too. I mean, and to give credit on both sides, right? Like, there are good people in all of these spaces, right?
There are wonderful people.
And I think George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, that moment in time where people became more aware of what was going on, you saw people step up in ways that they had not stepped up before and try to change spaces. But there were still people, and even more so in this moment that we are having where all diversity, equity, inclusion work is being rolled back, that you are seeing how people, whether from a place of scarcity, one of the isms, or whatever you want to call it, people are tearing other people down in a way that is chaotic and crazy and disappointing and scary, and makes these spaces that we're talking about, where we have been trying to create space, that we have been navigating, trying to open doors for the people behind us, even more treacherous and hard to navigate in ways that are different than when I was doing it for the first time. Because to our earlier points, either you were calling a spade, or, even in tech, you figured out how to navigate the people who were fake progressive. Now it's
real.
It's dizzying.
And you know what?
Yeah.
Just to bring like geography into it for listeners that have never been to the Bay Area, the state of California, I think, has a long-standing PR campaign about being the most progressive, the most liberal place in the country. And for some things, they are, right? Also, the state of California has sundown towns.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
And I think people forget that. And so when we talk about California as a state, forget what industry you're in, there is this public relations narrative that like everything's great. You can have three heads, four different husbands and wives, and you can say this goldfish is your child and we're going to love it. And as a person who's lived here for more than 15 years now, I'm like, yes, and. This state still has sundown towns, which for folks who don't know are towns that are usually historically in the South, where if you are Black and you are there after the sun goes down, anything can happen to you legally, such as death. And no one is going to investigate or say anything, right? Yeah. So my question to you is, because earlier in the conversation, you said that one way to combat this idea of being the only person in the room is to just highlight it and be yourself, because it's not going to go away, right?
Yeah.
In the face of all of these diversity and inclusion resources decreasing, especially the ones that were put together very quickly after George Floyd's murder in 2020, and now it's 2024, 25, and now they're leaving very quickly. What are your tips and tricks for folks to find comfort, find solidarity, and do their job well and thrive in spaces that were not created for them?
So I don't think anything's changed. Create the space if it's not there. Join the communities that see you and create a sense of belonging and advocate for you. Create spaces or find spaces outside of your day-to-day. Now, what I will say is if you are trying to create those spaces, because creating those spaces often takes resources, right? Like one of the things that I thought was great when I got to tech is if I wanted to convene women in tech or convene, Black people in tech, I could get resources from my organization to do that, to invest in that. And I don't know if that's any harder at this point, but in the face of reduced resources for diversity initiatives, get to the root of why you want to do these things. What I have found to be successful is articulating the why. And in my space, it is literally a national security imperative. It is literally a part of securing technology to have diverse voices at the table. Why? Because to truly understand how technology is showing up in the lives of people, you need those people to tell you how it's showing up in their lives, to tell you how they have used the technology that you intended for X to do Y, to understand the creative ecosystem that they have created around it, to understand how people's biases are infused into technology at the use, the implementation, the development, all these different stages, and to understand how people manipulate that technology. The malicious actors, they are people too. And so to really think about the best way to capture that intellectual capital, that confluence of perspectives that will really help you understand the threat landscape and the opportunity landscape for that matter, you have to have a diverse staff. And that coming together of perspectives is how you will see the forest through the trees, or through the trees and the forest. And so for me, it has become about really articulating that, because that's actually, from a work perspective, that's actually where I have seen the most need and the most progress being made, is when I get to the root of it. Like, this is not a nice to have. It's not even about creating safe spaces for you and I. Like, there is no work that is not done better than when there are more people at the table from a bevy of backgrounds. And so let's have that conversation rather than making it about a DEI initiative, right? If you're passionate about cybersecurity, if you're passionate about privacy, if you are passionate about the evolution of technology, period, all of those things require of you to think holistically about how that technology shows up in the lives of people, which means you need some people at the table.
I would also argue that it's actually a pretty good capitalist perspective as well, because guess what? Money is green. And so money is green, sis. And I think a wonderful brand that is the root, not the root, but definitely a good blueprint of that is Fenty Beauty.
Yes.
Rihanna became a billionaire off of making sure she had 42 and a half shades of foundation. If that doesn't tell you the importance of diverse perspectives in the room, I frankly don't know what does.
You're not trying to see it if you don't see it with these examples that we are giving.
And I would also like to add to that is that you're right. I think that you do need resources to have community, but our people for the longest of time built community without a dime or a pot to piss.
Oh, for sure.
So I want people to know that, sure, a couple of coins to help you build community and a couple of resources, you don't say no to that. We don't leave liquor on the table, family. We don't leave resources on the table. We should know that.
Yeah, for sure.
But you come from a people that have figured out how to not only build a community, but create freedom paths to challenge policies with nothing but a pot to piss in. So do not stop your community building because you don't have the $2 to do it.
Yes. And don't think small about where you get those resources.
Okay.
Right? I mean, collective resourcing is an option. And there are a bunch of external organizations and benefactors that will help you do the thing you want to do if you can make the business case for it. To your point about capitalistic perspectives, everybody can be sold on something if you can make the business case for why the investment needs to be made. And there are people giving money out for you to create community. I went to a mom conference the other day. It was a beautiful expression and celebration of motherhood. It convened a bunch of Black and brown mothers and invested in them, self-care, education, all of these things. And if you look at their sponsor list that recognize how important it is to pour into the moms who are cultivating our next generation or just have the buying power. Like, think about how much a new mom or any mom spends on commercial goods. I mean, like, there is a way to articulate that value proposition, that business case, in a way that will get you where you want to go.
Camille, we have to shout out the moms because, I'm a new mom and I didn't realize the $1 billion industry of newbornhood. Y'all, if you want to make some money, just the amount of consumerism that is in a new baby, and 95% of it you do not need. But do we buy it? Yes.
Yes. Just on the off chance to give you 5 more minutes of sleep. Yes.
Yes. I'll buy it.
Also, people create the smallest thing to solve the smallest problem. And you were like, I must need that. I must need that wand that wipes the stuff on the baby's butt, when really your finger will do it. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So reintroduce yourself to us. Who are you?
My name is Camille, and I am a strategist, a creator, an advocate, and a technophile.
I love technophile. I like that. You should make shirts. You should make shirts.
Yes,
you gotta trademark that. Yes, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing a sticker for your laptop. I'm seeing it. Well, thank you so much.
I need to be better about that. I need some swag. I need some personal swag.
Girl, if you don't make this passive income, okay?
Blood.
But thank you so much for being here. It has been an honor and a pleasure.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you for creating this space.